Our next speaker of this session is Jeremy Goodwin, who is CEO of SyncFab. Jeremy is an international fintech executive fluent in Chinese and French, and social impact entrepreneur passionate about technologies improving on the human condition, including additive and advanced manufacturing, artificial intelligence, Bitcoin, blockchain, clean tech, and several others. Currently, he is CEO of SyncFab, an IoT industry 4.0 blockchain manufacturing industry partner to the $140 million US DOE and DOC Clean Energy Smart Manufacturing Innovation Initiative, appointed by the White House and US Departments of Energy and Commerce National Network for Manufacturing Innovation. SyncFab is also the San Francisco Mayor's Office of Civic Innovation 2016 Startup in Residence in partnership with cities of San Leandro, Oakland, and West Sacramento. So Jeremy, you'll be giving your talk in Chinese then, correct?
No, not this time. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. So I'm going to be shifting gears a little bit with my presentation today. Some of you may be thinking that perhaps we misspelled the IoT in this presentation, but I assure you that's intentional. And I'll be speaking on the significance of the extra I in there and how we look at integrating both IoT and IIoT in smart city technologies. So most of us have our slides on why smart cities are, why the fascination with smart cities currently. So putting it in a bit of a historical perspective, so in the US we reached the tipping point of urbanization quite a long time ago, almost 100 years ago in 1920s, where we reached 50%. An interesting tidbit is that the Northeast at the time was 75% urbanized, and on the West Coast here we were only 50%. Fast tracking it to today, that's now flipped. Here on the West Coast we're now 90% urbanized, ahead of the Northeast, which is now 85%. So it's interesting that they only added an additional 10% over the last 100 years, whereas we urbanized 40%. But the globe, in a global perspective, they just reached an official urbanization status of 50% as of 2008, and they're projected to be 65% by 2050. And that is with 1.3 million people flocking to new cities every week, giving rise to megacities, which are characterized as cities as over 10 million people, of which there will be 29 of those by 2025. In 1975, there were only 3, New York City, Mexico City, and Tokyo. Tokyo today is about 36 million people. And interestingly, on a business trip I was there 2 months ago, it really stood out to me how organized and efficient they were, in contrast to where I'm currently based in the Bay Area, which can seem quite congested at times, even though their population is not even a fifth. So that being said, the implications of rapidly rising urbanized global population and the associated challenges that it brings to the availability of precious public resources like water, like public safety, transportation, energy, and industry underline the importance of applying new technological solutions made possible through low-power sensors, wireless and fiber optic networks, web and mobile-based applications, all driving an increasingly data-optimized society. And a few months ago, a bipartisan group in Congress, co-chaired by Darrell Issa of California and Yvette Clarke of New York, launched what they call the Smart Cities Caucus. The aim of the caucus is to improve lives through technology by listening to stakeholder groups and proposing legislation to further develop smarter infrastructure. So what I'm focusing more on in my presentation is the need for smarter economies and smarter economics, and how both IoT and IIoT can contribute to that agenda for smart cities. So a rising number of cities, as I just summarized before, are competing for the resources needed to entice and nurture a skilled workforce to foster local industry and a sustainable tax base. Because of this, cities need to develop their competitive advantages. 60% of global GDP growth is expected to come from the top 600 urban centers by 2025, and for lesser developed countries, 80% of all their future economic growth is going to come similarly from these cities, according to McKinsey. Of the 600 cities expected to bring that global GDP growth, nearly 1 in 7 of them are in the U.S. And today, New York and Los Angeles metropolitan areas are the world's 2nd and 6th largest, respectively, by GDP. A large proportion of middleweight cities also enjoy relatively high incomes, explaining the great overall importance of cities in the United States. The U.S. has more than 225 middleweight cities, and the top 28 of those cities after New York and LA contribute more than 35% of U.S. GDP. Large U.S. cities, those being over populations of 150,000, so I think it was mentioned earlier, the smaller cities, about 800,000, I think it is, here in Portland. 150 or 1,000 more inhabitants generated almost 85% of U.S. GDP in 2010, compared with 78% for larger cities in China and less than 65% for those in Western Europe during the same period. And by 2025, the 259 largest U.S. cities are expected to generate more than 10% of global GDP growth, a larger share than that of all such cities in other developed countries combined. So the U.S. has a broader base of large cities than any other region, explaining their greater economic influence. So the global economy today exceeds $75 trillion in value, with the World Bank forecasting global economic growth to reach up to 3.1% this year, following an outperforming 2017, as a recovery in investment and manufacturing continues. And 2018 is expected to be the first year since the financial crisis that the global economy will be operating at or near full capacity, according to the World Bank. Now, what's important to note is that most of this economic growth has been due to demand-side growth driven by coordinated fiscal and monetary stimulus and some Keynesian-style spending. These are short-term measures and they are unsustainable. The World Bank therefore highlighted that sustained growth will depend more on productivity gains and less on short-term demand-side measures. This is evident as economic growth is already at or near full capacity, so that investments in education, human and physical capital, and technology will drive growth going forward. So, according to a forecast done by the Economist Intelligence Unit recently, businesses are very willing partners for smart city initiatives. And it revealed that 58% of businesses wanting their local governments to do more to engage them in public decision making around improvements to urban infrastructure and services, and 63% believing that they should be investing more heavily in digital technologies that enable businesses to play a role in urban improvements, with 53% of those businesses of the opinion that being located in a smart city allows them to attract top talent that they need for their businesses. So the importance of manufacturing in all of this is that with the highest jobs multiplier per dollar spent of any industry, no discussion of unemployment policy, societal inclusiveness, or economic sustainability is complete without including a review of the presence or viability of a locale's manufacturing community. Today, different cities view their manufacturing communities in different lights. Some cities care, and to some it seems irrelevant. At SyncFab, we believe the relevance of the manufacturing community and its supply chain is paramount to sustain or even grow a middle class, addressing social equity and inclusion, which logically, therefore, does not exclude manufacturing. Manufacturing is also 16% of global GDP at around 12 trillion US dollars. And when factory utilization capacity is low, meaning less than 50%, full tax and employment potential are not being realized. As much as the manufacturing community is sometimes admires or not, Admired or not, it is equally misunderstood and often inadvertently abused as a result. For a long time, the manufacturing community has been facing a crisis, being sandwiched between bottom-up minimum wage operational cost pressures and top-down international trade pricing pressures, which have dismantled the supply chain supporting local manufacturing over the past 2 or 3 decades. That being the past, the industry is now faced with exciting new prospects with the advent of the fourth industrial revolution, or the age of the smart connected factory. So Morgan Stanley believes that our economy is arriving at a sweet spot of technology and pent-up demand, or what they call investment cycles being driven by a happy coincidence of having the right product at the right time, that processing ability and memory capacity, machine vision, sensors, especially cost, and the advent of cloud-based control come together at a time that consumer applications are peaking and industrial settings are underinvested. In the US, this is translating to reshoring, which in turn will drive higher manufacturing employment and the associated need for greater workforce training development. The convergence of these new technologies is expected to add an additional 5% of global GDP growth over the coming years. And as you can see accordingly, there's a rebound in manufacturing activity that is beginning to occur. It was at its highest rate in 1995 at about 26%, bottomed out at the time of the financial crisis in 2008, when we started to see the economy just start to wean itself off of the financial engineering a little bit. And then just as things started to get a little uncomfortable again in 2009, people started to fall back again and get lazy, and then all of a sudden, started to peak up again there in the end. So it's interesting, given the World Bank's view of the need for real productivity growth drivers in light of manufacturing activity to create real productivity. And then voila, with all the emphasis on the application of new technologies boosting productivity, we come face to the emerging technology of blockchain, looking for every avenue of productivity. In a study conducted by Deloitte of senior industry executives with plans to research this technology and actually apply it in their industry, the largest proportion of favorable respondents, 58%, were in the manufacturing and supply chain industries. Surprisingly, the lowest number were in the fintech space, with all the talk about Bitcoin. We're also starting to see an increasing number of government initiatives exploring ways to streamline federal procurement using blockchain technology. Last month, for example, the U.S. Navy's Innovation Department announced its interest in using blockchain technology for their manufacturing systems, for which they will conduct a series of experiments over this summer using blockchain technology to both securely share data between additive manufacturing sites as well as help secure the digital thread of design and production. And they're slated to release their results in September, showing their view on the practical application of this technology in a controlled environment. So at SyncFab, we have already begun our own series of manufacturing supply chain optimization trials using blockchain technology and how that can benefit the manufacturing supply chain. In order to understand the benefits of blockchain, we first need an overview of the basic needs of the manufacturing supply chain. So industry needs a responsive supply chain for lean manufacturing and just-in-time production needs. They require traceability to locate where their parts are in the supply chain at any given point in time. They require accountability in the supply chain to prevent order reneging and for recourse on poor quality control or incomplete information or certifications. And they require security for the protection of intellectual property and other assets. Now, how are those needs being met in today's manufacturing supply chain? Through heavy investment in trusted relationship networks, which have an air exclusivity, but they can be opaque, slow, and expensive. Centralized asset control for their equipment, their intellectual property, petty cash, cloud-based enterprise resource management tools. These feel secure, but they're hackable through firewalls, and it requires synchronous supply chain infrastructure across varying types of supply chain architecture. And there are traditional return on investment and metric-driven CapEx budget metrics that are used, and these are good for traditional measures but are they sufficient to provide enough incentive to mobilize resources needed to be competitive in this, in the age of this fourth industrial revolution, where they're projecting an added value of $3.6 trillion by 2024, according to Cisco and other groups. And where is all this investment going to come from? Is it going to come from the government? Is it going to come from industry? In addition, it's no secret that the manufacturing industry is highly inefficient, facing a never-ending struggle for improvement. Market conditions are great now, but they fluctuate, and it's best to innovate when times are good, as they are right now. So how are these needs being met through blockchain? So through decentralized consensus protection, it offers the highest form of security for intellectual property, where, for example, the current form of security is to sign an NDA and then you email out the designs. So the only form of security you currently get is you can store those intellectual property assets behind a firewall and then protect it on the outside with an NDA. Through blockchain, you can encrypt it using cryptography on the blockchain with only one actual storage of that file being accessible only by the authorized accessor. In addition, there's something called the incentive compatibility multiplier. I won't get too much into that. That can be very theoretical, but it's basically, it drives it so that everybody who's interacting with the blockchain is aligned in the same manner to achieve the same goal, so that it basically multiplies the ability and the behaviors of people who are working in the supply chain, for example, to make it more responsive. Something called trust-free smart contracts. So it makes the people involved in the transactions more accountable and responsive by design, and they're self-executing. So they will accelerate existing order flows and procurement order flows, whether they be through the government or in private industry. And it replaces these very expensive current arrangements that are in place for the heavily invested trusted networks that I mentioned. And what is really a dream come true for supply chain experts is what they call the ledger of things. So blockchain technology is often referred to as distributed ledger technology. Where on the one hand you have the Internet of Things, using the distributed ledger technology, you now have something called a distributed or a ledger of things. So as you're tracking your parts at a particular point in the supply chain, tracking them with their accordant technical documents, industry certification, and various other material certifications, safety certifications, they're all in the same place, accessible only by the authorized user. So the Internet of Things, where it meets the IIoT, most of us are already familiar with the term IoT, or the Internet of Things, which is not to be confused with IIoT. IoT tends to be the mass audience-facing consumer-connected devices such as smart thermostats and smart home locks, which are wireless networked and you can control using an app on your phone. IIoT, on the other hand, refers to all the data powering industry and the machines which make those consumer devices and control their underlying resources. So IoT is most commonly referred to as the industrial Internet of Things, but perhaps can also be referred to as the infrastructure Internet of Things. So IIoT brings machine learning and big data analytics technology to enable advanced manufacturing and advanced automation. So it's interesting to note in that context, for smart city technologies, what is the trend in smart city IT technology spend that's being projected? According to Siemens, who is involved not only in industrial automation, but also in all the varying smart city technology applications, not too different from Johnson Controls, smart mobility, smart energy. They project that industrial automation represents the largest smart city market spend through next year of 25%. This is followed by 18.5% in smart power, 17% in smart security, 13% in smart education, and et cetera. But it's just interesting to note in the context of the smart city discussion that the area where the largest budget is currently being allocated, you don't often hear about that much. And so that's why we are trying to say more about it. At the same time, there is a coincidence of increasing spend in the private sector as well on this industrial automation IT spend. So Morgan Stanley is expecting the share of information technology investment coming from the industrial manufacturing industry to more than triple, almost quadrupling, in contrast to the past 10 years of $200 billion to $700 to $800 billion over the next 10 years, which is being referred to as the dawning of what they call the data era investment cycle, which will be focused the most on gains to the manufacturing industry. So resulting from all that increased investment, we are going to see more seamless integration of IoT technologies in the manufacturing processes, which are expected to add an additional $1.8 trillion in manufacturing cost savings by 2025 and increasing earnings by 20% to the bottom line for those manufacturers. More tax, and these cost savings will come from predictive maintenance, inventory optimization, health and safety, manufacturing and logistics operations optimization, and et cetera. Additionally, the IoT industry is expected to add almost another 3 to 4 trillion US dollars to the global manufacturing industry value, according to Cisco, by 2025. And again, where is all this investment coming from? Is it coming from the US government? Is it coming from the Japanese government? Is it coming from industry alone? The way we see it is that it is a combination of all that, including with these new economy gains that are coming through the sharing of the collateralization of data, the sharing of equipment and information, capacity utilization increase, as well as the incentive multiplier that's being applied in the context of blockchain technology. So what is SyncFab? We are a manufacturing supply chain procurement platform, or what Morgan Stanley refers to as a manufacturing execution system. And we connect supply chain buyers directly with their hardware manufacturing suppliers peer-to-peer for streamlined procurement, primarily for precision manufacturing or those manufacturing processes that are compatible with this technology. And it's now also in development to be enhanced on the blockchain. The world's first decentralized smart manufacturing supply chain blockchain protocol incentivized for just-in-time production by the MFG and secured for product lifecycle management and a suite of additional blockchain-powered services using our smart manufacturing decentralized application. So similar to how the government created the internet, we believe that a robust industrial Internet of Things will be created through public-private partnerships between industry, government, and smart cities. So we're proud at SyncFab to be an industry partner of the federal partnership under the DOE and DOC that Dan mentioned, called SESME, which is an acronym for the Clean Energy Smart Manufacturing Innovation Initiative. It's a mouthful, but it was a big move on the part of the U.S. government under the prior administration to coordinate more between the public and private industry. It was the ninth and final federal partnership appointed by what they called the National Network of Manufacturing Innovation, and the partnership includes other major manufacturers like Honeywell and Raytheon, amongst many others. So similarly, a secure and holistic, what we view as a cross-industry blockchain, is not confined to current siloed databases, but will reap the maximum multiplier effect for data collateralization, efficiency gains across an emerging ledger of things. For this reason, SyncFab is a big believer in the value of these public-private hybrid blockchain model, which is why we engage in the public-private partnerships offline. And members of our partners so far include, as Dan mentioned, the San Francisco Mayor's Office, the City of San Leandro, some of the local chambers of commerce, as well as the federal partnership. So a smart city use case that we have working with the City of San Leandro in 2016, we were invited to partner with the City of San Francisco Mayor's Office, where we signed an MOU, and then with the City of San Leandro, which is strategically located in the industrial area, serving the hardware and manufacturing needs of the Bay Area. San Leandro has also been working to spearhead a broad-based smart city initiative with the support of a very proactive city council there. In 2017, we officially signed a service mandate with the city to work on a streamlined manufacturing procurement hub, basically to make their manufacturing supply chain more transparent and more accessible to supply chain purchase buyers around the Bay. Stan Leandro was an ideal partner to work with because of their numerous other smart city initiatives, including a public-private partnership fiber optic loop. I think you mentioned before that you worked with a dark fiber optic loop in another city. San Leandro partnered with a software company called OSI Soft to develop a 100 gigabit per second access fiber optic loop in their city with 60 laterals offshooting and exploring additional ways that industry and business can plug in to have this increased connectivity. So working with the city of San Leandro, we developed what we called our 2.0 manufacturing procurement network, mapping their adaptive manufacturing supply chain capacity to repurpose it to generate new pockets of demand from around the Bay Area. And with all the manufacturing and productivity activity that's going on there with the likes of Tesla, Applied Materials, Lam Research, there's heavy demand for manufacturing capacity, which is in short supply because of those structural reasons that I mentioned previously. And so the supply chain has been very strained, but at the same time, because it's inefficient, there's a lot of slack capacity that is being underutilized. And that's what we've been working with them on, to increase the capacity utilization of that available capacity. And that's it. So at SyncFab, we're a blockchain technology company. We were established in 2013 and proudly based now in San Leandro, where tech meets manufacturing. Thank you very much.